Lane Pierman, first name spelling Lane, last name Pearman. I'm a battalion chief in charge of special operations for the Wichita Fire Department. So as far as an update today regarding the fire scene at 806 and 812 North Market, there's not a whole lot of change since yesterday, as our crews are continuing to delayer, for lack of a better term, the fire debris to make sure that we, do not have any additional victims. The fire that occurred on Saturday night was extremely intense. It was fast moving and quickly involved the neighboring structure, which I believe is 806. Because of that, and because of the fact that both of those structures are well known to be locations where a number of homeless folks take up residence and whatnot, the likelihood is and continues to be very high that there possibly were some individuals that were not able to escape. As of right now, the number of victims from this fire still remains as the one that we found in the rear of 806 North Market. That victim still remains unidentified, but we believe that person to be an adult male, unknown race, unknown age. So,
I guess for us through this process, this is pretty slow going. We see an excavator kind of peeling stuff back, and I'm assuming there's fire personnel kind of looking through the debris as it gets pulled out.
We're doing a combination of things here. We had to bring in the heavy equipment from Public Works to assist us for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons was to mitigate the collapse hazard that two-story structure presented to us. There were 3 walls that remained standing that were very unstable, and while those were standing, there really was no other way for us to be able to get in there and actually start to search. The second one is obviously the large amounts of debris. With the excavator, it makes the process go a lot faster. So as we go through and we're essentially delayering that debris pile, and as we will go down, a certain area or a certain amount, and then we're using cadaver dogs through Central County Emergency Management, and we'll run them through. And what the cadaver dogs do is they're trained to pick up and help us locate human remains. While they have shown some interest in the 2.5-story structure in places, it's not a guarantee necessarily. It just helps us fine-tune the search, if you will. So that's where we're at with that. And this is probably going to continue for the rest of the day. I anticipate that will likely be completed by the end of the day today.
Talk a little bit. I mean, you mentioned that we have this big equipment here and all that. How often do you guys have fires like this where you have to go through the whole process of actually doing a search, of clearing everything? This doesn't feel like it's a very common occurrence.
It is not. And the reason that what makes this fire situation different was simply the number of homeless people. A lot of the structure fires that we make, the ones that are in occupied homes, it's easy to account for anybody who might be missing, right? In this case, 2 things complicated the effort. One, just the sheer intensity of the fire. The first arriving crews, I believe, arrived within 3 minutes of being dispatched, and upon their arrival, they immediately transmitted a second alarm because they had both homes nearly fully involved in fire. And this was right before 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, which is unusual, so, I mean, there's a lot of people out, and to have that tremendous amount of fire. So our offensive operations were very, very limited. Offensive meaning, we advance hose lines into the structure, and and the purpose of doing that, by the way, is to allow us to search for any trapped victims, right? And the actual searches that were extended on both of those homes it was limited to I believe the two-story structure, it was just one room, and the one-story structure, it was two rooms that actually had searchable space for us. We were really limited to that, and that operation was conducted very quickly, and as soon as those searchable areas were cleared, we removed everybody and went to a defensive posture where, we were flowing large amounts of water from the elevated master streams, and we placed into service a number of large caliber hose lines. And then, what was left was a tremendous amount of damage.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're still investigating what actually caused the fires. I don't know if, some of the cooler weather we've been having played into it at all, maybe someone trying to start a fire inside or anything like that.
Yeah.
How much does having to have to take down the whole building, have to do the search, complicate that part of the investigation, figure out what exactly caused this to happen?
I can't really speak to the, to that. I'm not an investigator, but, it's certainly, I don't know that it helps, right? The investigation is ongoing. We've got a number of investigators that are assigned and are working the case today. They really haven't narrowed anything down. They haven't ruled anything out at the same time, though. And I would anticipate that we'll hear some sort of update by our fire investigation unit sometime today. I don't know that they're really going to have any information that they can share, but I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear something from them later on this afternoon.
I guess talk about the complications as far as, I know that, usually when you guys arrive on scene of a house fire, if people are there and are able to get out, they tell you, hey, my family's still here, we're accounted for. If fire conditions are okay, you guys are still able to observe. But in a situation like this, I mean, no idea how many people could potentially be there and then simply unable to get
No, and you're absolutely right. When the house is occupied and the people that are in the house are able to get out, we will, we'll take the time and ask them, is everybody out? Yes or no? Even if they tell no, we will still always extend not one search but two searches into that structure to make sure that in fact everybody is out. And on this particular incident, this was a horrible situation because we had a number of people coming up to us, both for the firefighters that were operating on the Market Street side and the firefighters that were operating on the Broadway Street side. We had a number of different individuals that were absolutely insistent that there were still people in, not just the two-story home, but the one-story home. And so, we acted with the obvious sense of urgency to try to search the areas. But unfortunately, there was really only one or two rooms in each structure that was not fully involved in fire. So that really limited our ability to do that.
Yeah. I know you mentioned yesterday that these were used as training spots for the fire department, but also you guys have been responding the past couple of weeks to fires here because of squatting issues. Is that something you guys see commonly, or what was really the main issue we're seeing here that led up to this fire?
Yeah, and so, I believe over the last 24 months or so, between those two addresses, the fire department has made 20, maybe a little bit more, 20 or so responses. The vast majority of those are medical emergency type calls in nature. There was a reported structural fire at 806 and also at 812 sometime within the past 12 months or so. Those fires were fairly insignificant. I mean, as far as the extent of the damage in the fire, we were able to quickly handle those with just a few companies on the scene. But the past, we really notice it in the wintertime as the weather starts to turn colder. Naturally, folks will try to stay warm, and they'll do that by seeking refuge inside of these vacant structures. And it's not always homes. Sometimes it's commercial buildings. And then, they'll try to, whether it's a fire or they're trying to cook food, because obviously the majority of these structures, there's no utilities involved. So, and fires in these structures are notoriously dangerous as well, because they're not always in the best of condition. So they are a challenge for us.
Is there anything you guys do about that? Like tell them to leave, or how do you handle that situation?
Right. So we will refer, if there was any kind of criminal activity, per se, that would be forwarded on to the police department. But MABCD is notified, and they have the ability to board up the homes. But even still, even with the homes properly boarded up, and I mean really properly secured, it's not a guarantee. And oftentimes within a week or two, people will find their way back in. It's incredible, really. But these vacant structures are a concern, and they do complicate things for us.
Have you guys been in contact with the property owners at all? I know there's plans to demolish the buildings in a few weeks, a few months, but talk to them as far as just what the situation of the buildings were, how they were keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, and they did. They had done a good job. These two structures, I believe, were scheduled for demolition just within the next week or two. In fact, all of the utilities, including sewer, had been disconnected and capped, so they were just completely ready to go. During business hours, when they would see people that would be in or out, they would convince them to leave, and try to put them into connection with a shelter or whatnot, but that just doesn't seem to work. In fact, on Saturday night during the firefighting operation, so we had the two structures that were on fire, but we also had concerns with the other three exposures that surrounded those two, one of those being the brick fourplex that you might be able to see behind me. So that structure was immediately threatened. The shingles on the roof were starting to smoke, and so we took the preemptive action to make sure that there was nobody currently inside, because at that point we were unsure if we were going to be able to confine the fire to those two structures. So we confirmed that nobody was inside, or if there was, they left. But during the firefighting operation, people were wandering back in while we were still actively engaged in firefighting. So, if the presence of 60 plus firefighters and all of the attention and commotion is unable to keep people out, you can imagine the challenge when you don't have that.
What's going to happen next with this? You guys know what's going to happen to this area, or is it just gonna
I do not know. I know that the folks who had bought it, I assume that they have plans for something. I don't know what it is.
Real quick, I just want any damage to 800 North Market here or anything like that, or is that building mostly square? So there's such a small gap between that and what's there.
Yeah. Luckily for that structure, that building is of masonry construction, non-combustible, so there was no fire damage directly. We did have to get inside of that building, and so we may have had to force one or two doors to get inside, because there is still the ability to fire to get in, especially through that roof line was fairly low, and could have presented an avenue for fire spread to us, but there was no actual fire damage to that structure.
I guess obviously the folks who are property owners here were doing their best to keep people out. Your advice to other property owners throughout town who have vacant homes, because I know that there's a lot of fires, there's a lot of incidents that happen throughout the city where people maybe don't have stuff secured properly, or maybe just take time to advise the folks.
To properly secure the structures, pay attention to those structures, and if they're not sure how to properly secure the structures, they can contact the fire department offices, and we can give them some information and possibly some other resources on the proper methods to secure the structures. But I got to say though, even when it's done properly, you still have to pay attention, and because within a week or two or a month or so, inevitably people will find their way back in there. Good? All right.